Find a seat okay? We can bring some more chairs in if we need them. Those of you that know me already know I'm a smart ass, but I got to convince the new folks of that. Anyway, a couple of things I want to cover, but first thing, always, we start with a prayer. And who would like to volunteer to lead our prayer this? Yes, sir. Let's do it.
We'll pray. Father, we love you today. We're thankful for all your blessings. We're thankful to be in a nation, Father, that we can gather together. We're thankful, Father, for those one gathered here that came out today, and we just ask a special blessing upon them. We ask that you just protect our country, protect our state, Father, and give us wisdom, Father, when we lack it. We love you today, and we give you glory for everything. Bless this meeting in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Darrell. You're welcome. Can I ask our incumbent state senator to lead us in the pledge?
Yes. Stand, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen. All right, a couple of things I want to mention, and then we'll get to our program. Saturday, May 30th, Church of Christ in Tonkawa. That's 300 North Public. It's the northeast corner of Public Road and the old highway, North Street in Tonkawa. We're having a candidate forum for Senate District 10. So that will be our incumbent, Bill Coleman, and the challenger, Jaden Terrazas. It'll be open questions, so it'll be a good time to bring your questions. We'll have each one will get time at the top of the meeting to introduce themselves and talk about their campaign and their plans in office, and then we'll have live questions from the audience. And then the week after that, which is June 6th, D-Day, the meeting on the 30th is at 1 p.m. at the church. The following Saturday at 12 noon will be a candidate forum for the 6 candidates running for House District 38. This is to fill John Pfeiffer's empty seat. He was termed out this time around. And 4 of them will actually be there. The other 2 have other more important things to do than come to a forum and campaign. So that'll make it a little easier, because I try and keep these to an hour and a half maximum, and that'll be a lot easier with 4 candidates than with 6. So please put that on your calendar. Those of you that have my phone number, if you've got any questions or comments on it, don't hesitate to call me. My number is a 24/7 number connected with our political efforts. Anybody got anything they want to contribute? Hey, Jay, thanks for coming.
I can't think of anything.
Okay, I was afraid you'd be at the parade today. Okay, very good. Our guest today is Darrell Weaver. I'm anxious to hear from Darrell. Number one, he's running for lieutenant governor. How many in that race now?
Well, probably, I think 5 or 6.
Wow. So very likely there'll be a runoff in August. Yeah. But also, too, he was the state's cop narc for many years, and I'm sure he's got a ton of stories related to that. And I'm sure I personally would like to hear some of them. I know we've gone from, I think we had 12,000 grow facilities a few years ago, and we're down to about 3. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think I'm lower than that.
Huh?
Oh, yeah, it's 2,000, I think.
2,000, good.
Yeah.
They're shutting them down. Well, they needed to get shut down. Okay, very good then. I'm going to turn the floor over to Darrell, and let's pay attention to the man.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all giving us the opportunity to come, and appreciate, Terry, you being kind enough to allow me to come. My wife's here. Y'all met her, but she's the better half of this operation, Kim. So, and we wrote a book about my undercover stuff, and it's on Amazon, and we may have brought one if somebody wants it today. But anyway, I just want to kind of go at 10,000 feet, and then we'll open it up for questions. I'll kind of tell about where I've come from and where we want to go in our career. I was raised in Southwest Oklahoma. I was the middle of 5 kids in very rural Oklahoma. I was from Comanche. My wife was from the big city of Duncan, and so we're from that area down there. My mom worked as a licensed nurse in a nursing home. She ran a nursing home about 2 blocks from our house, and my dad was an oil field pumper. So I was the first to go to college of the 5 kids, and just very proud of how I was raised. It was always about faith, family, and service. I was named after an uncle that died with the United States Army uniform on his body. So it's always been about that with my family. My mom had a drug problem. She drugged me to church on Sunday. She drugged me to church on Wednesday. And she drugged me to church about every vacation Bible school she could find. And I think that was her sanity during the summertime with us 5 kids. I ended up at Cameron University and getting an undergraduate at Cameron in accounting, and ended up getting later a master's of business. But while I was over there, something happened that really changed the trajectory of my life, and that was a couple of guys walked into a bank in Geronimo, Oklahoma, and they killed 4 people. And one of them was a very popular coach's wife, a basketball coach's wife, and she was pregnant, and it killed the baby and obviously her. But what that did for me, it really kind of changed my life. I knew I was a bull in a china closet with an accounting degree. I never liked it anyway. I went ahead and finished it, but I couldn't see myself in a cubicle the rest of my life. But at the end of the day, I really felt called at that point to go into law enforcement. My great-grandfather wasn't the former sheriff. We didn't have a long history of that at all, no history. But really felt called. President Reagan was president, and of course, Nancy was just say no. So I got on at the Bureau of Narcotics in 1987. It's sure hard to believe it's been 40 years ago next year I walked into that office as a junior narcotics agent, and I didn't know the difference between marijuana and alfalfa. Now, I knew alfalfa was heavier because I hauled hay at a nickel a bale at one time, and they can sure crank that baler down with that alfalfa. But I didn't know anything about it. I just went on very innocently, and of course I ended up spending over 28 years at the agency. I rose through the ranks, that's where I'm at in Cleveland County now, my Senate district. And that's how I got there. I rose the ranks and ended up being a supervisor running all of Oklahoma City and enforcement that came way up in here to Ponca City. We did steel deals up here in Stillwater, ran that huge unit. And then eventually in 2006, I became the director. Now, what that is Terry pretty well said, it's kind of the top drug cop in the state. All the opioid problems, the pain medicine, all the problems we were having with that was on my shoulders. Methamphetamine labs, the cartels coming in. My people handled a lot of that. First lieutenants of drug cartels trying to set up shop in Oklahoma. So we dealt with all that. The marijuana, we talk about the marijuana fields. I almost laugh about it because, so many of the candidates on so many races are talking about, the marijuana grows. And I laughingly say I still have chigger bites on my feet, almost. I'm joking, but from laying in a marijuana field with a machine gun, I lived that life, and I knew all about it. But anyway, that's where my past. I'm very proud of my work at the Bureau. I was the director for over 9 years, the longest in the history of the state. We started in 2012. We had agents started coming to us, and we were infiltrating a lot of organized crime in the drug world. And they came and they said, we believe that they're trafficking girls more than they're trafficking and making more money than they are the drugs. So we petitioned the legislature, of which me and Senator Coleman are a part of now. Governor Fallin signed into law after they passed it, and that was to start a human trafficking unit at the Bureau of Narcotics, and I'm very proud of that. There's nothing that probably is a snapshot of what I want to be as a public servant, as that is what happened at a Rotary Club there after we'd rescued a couple of girls off of Lincoln Boulevard, and I was speaking in 2013. And afterwards, the place was packed. People really wanted to know about it, and they still do. But a woman off to my left flank, and I noticed that she wanted to say something afterwards, and finally she made her way up there. She had tears in her eyes, and she said, I want you to know that was my daughter you rescued on Lincoln Boulevard. So, if there was ever a snapshot my wife and I want to do, that's it right there. This is really not about politics. I don't really like the politics of any of it. And when you're up there and you watch it, you really don't like that. It's really about public service to me, and how we can serve. So I've been in the Senate. I chair public safety, and I just about everything to support your troopers and your deputies, and we can go domestic violence victims, human trafficking victims, the elderly. My mom, we walked into those nursing homes as kids. We weren't afraid of the elderly. We weren't afraid of somebody sitting over in a wheelchair and screaming. Most people will run from those scenarios, and I think that's part of the lens I look through. I've been very protective of the elderly. The kiosk bill last year that protects them getting ripped off of these coin bit machines, I carried that. I carried a register for abuse of elderlies through the Attorney General's office a few years ago. So just about it, I've always fought for the victim. I've always fought for that. But I've also been, and this is very significant to what you guys and gals want to believe in, and that is the Second Amendment. I carried, and y'all are probably aware of this, I carried the Personal Property Protection Act, House Bill 2818 last year. And it was a heck of a bill to get through. I had to expend a lot of capital, and Don Spencer and it took a lot to get that over the finish line. And we finally got it over, and now it's law, and it really extends the castle doctrine of our property. It was very important. You were talking, Jim, right? Was it Jim? Jim, you were talking a while ago about the Constitution, and every time I hear that, I always think about, now I chair, you got to remember the scenario. I chair public safety, so I'm presenting my bill, my Personal Property Protection Act, in my own committee. So I've handed the gavel over to the vice chair, Warren Hamilton, and then I'm presenting this bill. And it's funny because even in that committee room, I was reading out of the state constitution that we have a right to protect our property. And even when I got on the Senate floor, when we finally got a floor vote, and it was work. You can ask Don Spencer about that one. It was work. I probably expended as much capital on that to get it out there, and it's tough. But we got it out there, and I was arguing from the Senate floor about the personal property protection that is in the Constitution, and it clearly says that we have the right to protect our property. So that was very important to me. I was raised in rural Oklahoma where you either had a fishing pole in your hand or a gun in your hand, and that's just the way we were. And so I'm a cop, and I understand it, but I'm also, cops cannot be at enough places to protect the evil that we're faced with in today's society. And I'm a firm believer in that, firm believer. But there's one thing that went through last year that a lot of people, it kind of went unnoticed. And that is, the Senate's always been a little bit of a log jam when it comes to Second Amendment and gun bills. I mean, if you've kept up with it at all, you know that. But last year, I really looked at a lot of the bills, and we passed probably the record number out of my committee. We passed 16 bills last year. And in my years, and Bill and I came in together, our 8 years, there's never been that many bills come through public safety in the Senate. There probably hasn't that many bills come through in the last 8 years total, to be quite frank with you. But I believed in them, and some of them didn't get off the floor. I've got one sitting out there right now that it gives you a right to carry a firearm into a voting booth. That's my bill. Because I think it's bizarre that we think for a second, and I'm an old cop, you think for 5 seconds a bad guy's going to read the statute when there's a crime that says you can't carry a gun. If they want to come do harm in a voting booth, they're going to come do harm in a voting booth. So it's it's record, and I'll talk about records here in a minute when I get to that point, but a clear record of support, clear. A+ rating, of course, career-wise. Why do I want to run for lieutenant governor? Because we prayed about it. We thought and prayed about it a long time, because nobody in their right mind would just jump into a statewide race unless you really feel led. We as believers feel very led to be in this race, or I wouldn't be in this. Too much work. It's just too much work, and we've worked hard. We've been at it over a year now. But what would I do? My wife's a physician. She's an MD, OBGYN, delivered lots of babies in her life and retired from that. And we wanted to start, we started with one clinic, and now we have 5 clinics. So we're small business owners 101. We're not owned by a private equity firm. We're not owned by a hospital. We're like private. We're just people out here. We wake up every day and try to make a living, and we have about 20 employees. We're not huge. But now we have 5 locations in Southwest Oklahoma. And so my number one pillar is really economic development and workforce development, because it's hard to find people. And if you're a small business owner, you know that. So that's my number one. My second one is aerospace. I'm a pilot, I fly, and I'm the vice chair of appropriations over aerospace, transportation aerospace. And what we do in these airports, I mean, we've flown into Ponca, I've flown in a bunch of these airports, and they're really the gateway to some of these communities. Because if we're not careful, when I was raised in rural Oklahoma, we will lose rural Oklahoma. And I call anything out of Oklahoma City, Tulsa rural. And no slam on Ponca City. I know it's a nice sized town. But if we're not careful, we'll lose it. And something that should alarm everybody in this room is this fact. In 2020, the census, there was one Senate district that made a drastic move. And it was Kim David, who's now in the Corporation Commission at Senate District 18, and it came from the Wagner-Tahlequah area. Now it's in Canadian County. And Jack Stewart's in that. Jack's a fine man. But he's in that. What's that tell you? That it's a shift. There is a shift to everybody to be in Oklahoma City and everybody to be in Tulsa. And when you get in there, you got to be careful, because them things, they turn a little bit purple. That thing's turned a little purple, and I'm going to be kind here, but it's purple in some of them districts. You look at where the Senate's broke down, it's in, they're coming from Tulsa, Oklahoma County, and Cleveland County. There's one out of Cleveland County. So you look at that map, and it should alarm everybody here. So secondly is aerospace. First is economic development. Second is aerospace. We've got it's a second leading industry in the state, $44 billion behind oil and gas, and it will overtake. We've got the big boys, and God bless our friends from Enid and Vance and what that happened, but we've got these Air Force bases. So that's the future of Oklahoma, and as a pilot, I really understand that. I'm not an airline pilot, but I do understand aviation, so that's important. Third is tourism. I look at it a little bit differently than some people. Having worked the whole state in my former life, I really think that we have to not, I'm about Route 66, but not every town has Route 66 through it. I'm about the thunder. You couldn't have paid, Bill, I think it was me and you talking today during that parade. We were talking about we don't have enough money to pay for the publicity that the thunder brought Oklahoma. I mean, we don't have the money because it's worldwide. So I'm all about that, and I support that. But I would be much more specific on what towns can do. What's Ponca City got in their history with the oil and gas business? Well, how can we help them? So I would be a little bit different. I'm big about the lakes. We have 200 lakes. We were raised as a family tent camping on lakes. And I think they're a well-kept secret in Oklahoma, and we got to do more with them. And then fourth is health. My wife and I are into healthy living and healthy medicine, and we just believe Oklahoma can be healthier. One more prescription is probably not the answer for many of us. So we believe that there's some avenues there to help. And then finally, public safety. I'm a guy that believes in as a constitutional republic. I believe that if your house is on fire, you better have a fire truck coming. If you're having riots in the streets, you're not going to worry about your potholes. So I really firmly believe we have to be in a state of law and order. We saw it back several years ago when President Trump was elected the first time, what happened. And that's why I came into the Senate, is because they were spitting on cops, and I thought it was disgusting. That wasn't happening in Oklahoma, but it could have been. It could have been, because there was riots, if you remember, in Tulsa. I mean, I watched them on TV and in Oklahoma City. So that's my pillars, and I always close with these two things, and then we'll open it up for questions. In the climate of elections, you've got a lot of people, and by the way, and I know this will not come to a shock to anybody in this room, but people will stand up here and tell you exactly what you want to hear. So I always tell people, you vet me and vet me hard. I mean, I ran a visible agency for 9 years. I've been in the Senate for 8 years. I've had thousands of votes recorded. Do I wish I kind of had a few of them back, maybe, if I thought about it? Probably. But you know what I tell people? There is a green light and a red light on that machine. A green light and a red light. And I'm going to tell you, there's not a 60-40. There's not I kind of like some of this bill, but I don't like this part of the bill. And I tell you, you come down to it, it's more difficult. People ask me, is it more difficult to run the Bureau of Narcotics for so long or be in the Senate? And I always qualify my answer by saying, first off, you have to qualify the Bureau was dangerous, so dangerous at times, so the danger factor in that position was much greater because you had people in harm's way. But day to day, I would say the Senate, just having to figure out what you're going to do and how you do it, and the criticism you catch, no matter what you vote. So it's very, very difficult at times to navigate through some of those. Some of them are cut and dried, obviously, those votes. Many of them are. But that's number one, vet me. And then secondly, I'll just say this. A lot of times people say, well, we don't even know what the lieutenant governor does, and that's normal. But I will say this, the number one thing they do, and they're on boards and commission, it's a whiteboard, you can do all that stuff. But the number one they think, that the lieutenant governor, and George Nye said this in his book, because he was lieutenant governor for 16 years, and then we changed that, and of course he was a governor for 8 years. In his book, he said, the lieutenant governor is an insurance policy you hope you never have to use. So you're a heartbeat away. And so I always tell people, and I'll use a little Southwest Oklahoma vocabulary when I do this, you better vote somebody that can run the joint if they had to. And with my experience in public safety, my experience in the Senate, and being able to navigate that and be able to step in if something tragic were to happen, or if they were to move on to a federal job, because that happens. So I would say, someone said, you're probably the only guy in the history of the state of Oklahoma as a lieutenant governor candidate that's ever been shot at for this state. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that service. Now, I always qualify. Now, they shot through a door and it went right through my head, and I was leaning over, it would have got me. But I'm going to tell you right now, I was a good guy that got shot at. So I wasn't a bad guy running through the alley trying to run from somebody, because we've had some pretty good characters that's run for office in Oklahoma. So I always qualify that. So I don't think I would open it up. We have a few minutes, Terry.
We got plenty of time.
Okay.
For questions.
Okay.
I'm going to exercise my authority here. I've got a couple to start off with.
Okay.
First off, what kind of machine gun?
It was a Car 16. It was a fully automatic we had, and it was really nicely done. It had a collapsible stock, so you could sling it over your shoulder. Yeah. And then you also had a riser. Those machine guns, if you've ever shot them, and we did a lot of training at Camp Gruber, so we did a lot of machine gun fire over there, sniper fire. And I was a sniper at one time in my career many years ago. We had 308s, and that's an impressive rifle there. Yeah. But anyway, the machine gun would climb on you if you've ever shot one, and it'll climb on you. So we put a suppressor on the end of it, and it kept the heat down in the barrel and stuff like that. So
how quick would you run through a 30 round magazine with that?
About as fast as you could hold that trigger back.
Pull the trigger.
It'd get hot on you before. Yeah. It lights it up. And we trained with 3-round burst. Yeah. Even with a machine gun, you train with 3-round burst. Get back on target. Because the difference in training in a military, obviously, and a civilian is that you got to count for every round as a civilian. Yeah. And you have to be very careful. That's why clearing houses and stuff like that was so important, to be good at it and really know what you were doing. And because there was multiple scenarios I could talk about. I don't think I wrote anything about this in the book, but one time in Durant if you're down there, Durant if you don't, not from there. But
I was born there. It's Durant.
Yeah, that's right. You were. But we cleared a house one time, and it was dim light. Of course, we have lights and everything, but dim lights. You got to remember, on a search warrant, it's running about. I write about this, and the search warrant's like being on a roller coaster, but the roller coaster in that scenario can come off the track pretty fast. And there were some kids back in a room in a fake gun. It was a plastic gun, but it looked real. And I never will forget it. Nothing happened, but I always remember that day in that dim light. If they would have just grabbed that fake gun, what we would have done, probably would have shot them. Yeah, well, you'd have been forced to. We'd have been forced to. And then a guy, biker group. This was in Jefferson County. I mean, a big time biker group. and moved in from California, and we finally got a search warrant on him. And a guy, we go in and he dives for the. I mean, we're moving fast, and he dives under going to the couch. He was in the living room and dove, and didn't want to get down, didn't want to do commands. Get your hands up. You go through all that. Didn't want to comply, so he was already like, this guy's going to be trouble. He dives, tries to go up under the couch. Well, there's a gun under there, and we stop him. We don't have to shoot him, but we did have to shoot a few.
At least you got a team with you when you're pulling that stuff.
Yeah,
Makes a huge difference, right?
It is. You never would run a search warrant by one or two people. You have particular jobs, and we did it. We tried to do it right because they were so volatile, and especially if you get in things like large houses with staircases and stuff like that. Those were always big problems. And I remember this was over in Watonga, of all places. We hit 5 or 6 places at one time, big time crack problem. And we went out to the airport. We taped out the houses in a hangar and had everybody run through them to make sure that we knew what we were doing and where the curves were. We had some information about the way the houses were laid out and all that stuff. You would do it.
Well, that way, whenever a situation arises, hopefully it's something you've already dealt with. You instantly know what you're supposed to do at that point. Which bike were you with? Mongols, Hells Angels?
I don't remember. Terry's been so long ago, but yeah.
I was in New Mexico, Albuquerque for years, and the Banditos run the show there.
We have some very, very visible biker groups, at least back whenever I was doing cases, yeah. There was a clubhouse in Dixon, Oklahoma, outside of Ardmore, a legitimate biker hangout. So I don't know if it's been years ago. I don't know if they moved it or what.
I rode motorcycles since 1961, and I always carried a gun with me because of the bike gangs.
Yeah.
If you get crossways with them at the rest area, you've got two choices: give them everything you want or kill them all.
Yeah.
There's no gray area there.
And you don't want to be between them if two of them are fighting.
Yeah.
Because that happened in Buffalo Wild Wings or somewhere down in Austin, Texas one time. This was about 5 or 7 years ago, and a couple of them gangs come across each other, and they just lit each other up. I mean, in the restaurant, they rolled out into the street. I mean, you don't want to get between them over there.
Now, policy question.
Okay.
Matt Pinnell, our current lieutenant governor, his main focus has been on tourism. What would be your, say, 3 areas that you'd want to concentrate on as lieutenant governor?
I think kind of what I've said, but just that economic workforce in rural Oklahoma. Yeah. I don't want to forget rural Oklahoma. I won't. And I just think that you work, and we've crisscrossed the state not only as a senator, but you listen to, and I'm on business with Bill. So we hear about business things and stuff that goes on. But, I think some of these communities, and I'm a guy that's not looking, do you move 1,000 rooftops in a small community? Probably not. Because you don't have the housing, and you're going to scavenge all the good jobs away from people that already have jobs there or businesses. So you've got to be careful what you do. But I always use it, if you have a welding shop that's got 10 jobs, can you figure out, can you add 5 to it and help that community, a small community? So I think that's going to be one. And then aerospace, again, aerospace is a big, big deal. But it's not just the Boeing engineers. It's just not the mechanic that's going to the career techs all over right now, learn how. You can't find a mechanic. So I think Oklahoma is in a place just geographic in the United States where we can be the leader of general aviation. We can have people flying here. I flew out of Chickasha. Our plane's in Westheimer at Norman, but when I trained, it was at Chickasha, and I loved it out there. And I jokingly tell people, you love it in western Oklahoma because if it's bad, if you have an engine problem, you land anywhere, right? You got all these wheat fields, and you can't say that in southeast Oklahoma in the hill country. But I would do that second, and then tourism would be third. But I want to do more. I think the relationship with the tribes. There's a lot of intrigue about people around the nation. When I was at the FBI National Academy, they in 1999, it's been a long time ago. But we had about 275 members from all over the nation, and I never will forget. Someone came up to me and they said they was from the East Coast, and they said, do y'all still live in teepees in Oklahoma? And I said, no, no, we actually don't. We're more modern Jews. We was at a Tahlequah, my wife and I were at Tahlequah at the chamber, and they were telling us, and you guys, remember, we were in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, home of the Cherokees, at their chamber, and a woman was in there, and she was like, that worked there, and she said, yeah, so we was talking about the tribal influence, and she said a group came through there, and they asked this woman, they said, can you show us where there's an Indian out at? We want to see an Indian. And she says, it's so funny, she just kind of goes, well, everybody in here is an Indian. Yeah, but you know, you're either a part of a tribe in Oklahoma, or your spouse is part of a tribe, or you should have been part of the tribe. You just didn't sign up. You didn't get on the rolls. So I think that we got to understand there's probably some opportunity there, really, for tourism.
You mentioned aerospace. It sure would be good to get a channel of communication set up with Elon Musk. You know about his plans. He just applied for permission from the FCC to launch 1 million low-orbit satellites. In addition to the 10,000 he has up there, 1 million satellites.
Wow, it's crazy.
And, you know, his plan is to build the data centers in space. Have you heard about that?
No, I have not.
You know how much objection there is in the rural
Right.
areas about the data centers because of energy and groundwater. He wants to put them in outer space. When they deploy their solar panels, the energy will be all free, and he's convinced that he can dissipate the heat in space quicker and cheaper. And I mean, and this is, well, you know, his SpaceX. In fact, it's supposed to go IPO sometime during the next couple of months. And but 1 million new satellites. I mean, this guy is he's our Leonardo da Vinci of this century.
That's right.
But that would be somebody that might be worth trying to cultivate because he's got so many irons in the fire. And he's just brilliant. Yeah. He makes stuff. I just bought a Tesla, and I can drive it for 3 cents a mile for fuel as long as I charge it at home. Imagine that. But anyway, that's something when you do get into August, you might think about it.
Well, we got that spaceport out there at Burns Flat, and of course yeah, that's exactly right. And we kind of regrouped on that last year as a bill came out. We kind of grouped that with aerospace department, and it's going to be a good move. But Bridenstine, that used to be a head of NASA and used to be a congressman, Bridenstine, he actually is doing a lot of work with some companies out there. And that airstrip, I've landed on that in my little plane. You could do, I mean, that's a 12,000 foot airstrip. I mean, you could, sometimes when you're flying, you can't see the runway. If you know, you think, where is that runway at? Where's that at? I promise you won't miss that up there at Burns Flat, 12,000 feet. It's like a beacon in the night. I mean, but I've landed on that thing. You know, I mean, you could probably do 5 touch and goes and climb to 500 feet. I mean, it's just goes on forever. But that's a great asset to Oklahoma, and we've got to do more with it. But that's a great idea, Terry, to pursue some of that.
Just think of it. Moving all the data, if they're all in orbit, that's going to eliminate. And I can imagine there'll be a lot of grassroots support for that kind of a program because every rural area that they're talking about putting the data system in, they've got a really strong local group doing their best to shoot it down. Yeah. Okay. Now somebody else's turn.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, that's out there. We actually voted that out, I think, in the Senate. It's in the House right now. I think it's out there, yes.
Is that SB 6?
Yeah, we got so many SBs out there, I can't keep up with all of them, honestly. But I think that's out of the Senate and at the House right now, yeah. I know down there at Moore, we had actually a school board race, 4 weeks ago, and the young lady that won it needed to win it, you know. But, oh my gosh, it was... you know, Moore, it's a huge school district, 3 6A schools, and I don't know, was it 500 or 600 people voted in the whole thing? I mean, yeah. So we got to probably do better than that, but yeah, but that's out there for sure. 832 state question 832 at the minimum wage. I'm telling you, vote against it. It's going to be horrible for our state. It really is.
$15 is just the start.
Yeah.
It will fly higher than that, much higher.
how I phrase it is don't Californicate Oklahoma.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the open primaries, we beat that back, and I'm very proud of our party for doing that, because that would have been a headshot.
Have you heard about what's the latest polls in California where they have jungle primaries? The two leading candidates are both Republicans.
In California.
Yes. Would that be poetic?
Oh, my gosh.
That's part of my prayers every evening.
Yeah, yeah. But 832 is going to be a real problem for small business. It really will, all business, but small business in particular. And what happens is, and I looked at that pretty closely, and it's what it's called is the wage spiral. The wage spiral is because what happens economically, if you have to pay those higher ones, then it's just like us. We would have to increase our services, price of services, and before long, you're in a spiral where you can't keep up with everything. And if you can't pay your payroll, and if you can't do that, you're in a spiral in which you're not going to have a business. It will run people. I know you had a question.
All right. Yeah, two parts.
Okay.
First of all, what do you see other than being a governor in waiting? The role of the lieutenant governor, and also, does the lieutenant governor really have any power to do anything?
I think politics is about relationships. And it's just like in the Senate. You know, you have people that you have great relationships with. You have people that you trust. You have people that are subject matter experts. So when I said that, say this, a huge advantage I will have is that I've got relationships on the fourth floor. Sometimes if you go in and you've never been in that body, or if you don't really know anybody, you don't have relationships. Now that doesn't mean that you can't go in there and you can't push the Senate and the House around, because one's the executive branch and one's the legislative branch. But I think the relationships would be very beneficial. I would weigh in on stuff. Now, whether I could get anything done, that would be just something I could work through people. But I think I'm respected enough in there, coming out of there after 8 years, that people would listen. So I think that's an advantage. And I would, look, and I know you're not the governor, but I do think that that's an underutilized position. I really do. I think that you can go in there. Matt Pinnell told me one day, he was in the chamber, and we were talking before a meeting started. He said, you know, and I always use this, and it's ironic he brought it up too. He said it's really a whiteboard. You can kind of bring to the lieutenant governor's way what you want to get involved in. Now you're on some boards and commissions, and I get that, and that's very important. But I think it's all about, everywhere I've been in my career, whether it be at the Bureau or whether it be in the Senate, I've been a producer. And I would never get in there just to be a ribbon cutter. Now, will I come cut a ribbon? If Bill opens a new radio station, I'll be the first one in line to be there. But I don't see that. Some people see that as just that. But I think it's a promoter of the state. And I love this state. I'm not a guy that's going to stand up here and talk about how bad everything is. Oh, we got some problems. We're in the middle of them. We got a lot of problems. But at the end of the day, I love this state. It's still the greatest state in the United States,
Amen.
Bar none. We're faith, family, and so we're not afraid to serve. I mean, our military people stay here. I mean, I could go on forever about that. So I'm a guy that wants to promote this state and believes in this state. And the state's growing. There's more people. We've heard this. There's more people migrating from Dallas or from the Texas up here. And some people, I think it's because of what we have. And I think it's a lot of just our ethical compass, our moral compass that we have in this state.
It's not Texas, it's Baja, Oklahoma.
Yeah. But anyway, great question. Yes, sir.
Kind of follow up on Jay's question. I've got two different answers to this question from experts. Does the state constitution allow the lieutenant governor, when presiding in the Senate, to pick up the gavel, dismiss chairman, appoint chairman, bring bills to the floor, and so forth? In other words, can he circumvent the president program?
Okay. That came out a few months ago. I say that's probably been 6 months ago, as fast as time flies. But that came out, some individuals say, hey, we need somebody to come in and just take over the Senate. Okay. So I personally looked at the Constitution, And I read it, and I thought, okay, break it down. What exactly does it say?
Yeah.
First off and foremost, the lieutenant governor is in a different article than the legislative branch. So it's an executive branch position. It's just like the vice president. They all did it. I mean, in 1907 they just didn't wake up one day and just create all this. It's really off the federal government. So number one, that's a big part right there. It's in different branches of government. Now it's a quasi position because you do specifically vote on a type. Mary Fallon had to do that, and it does do that. And you preside over the Senate at times. But this is the thing. I always take it at this is why I tell people when I'm asked this, because I've been asked it many times. I think of it as a practical sense, okay, from being in the Senate. Because some people say, well, that's all you got to do is grab the gavel and go to work. Okay, let's use a practical sense about this. And I've got a witness here. If I get completely off base, he can raise his hand and he can correct me, okay, because he's in there too. So, right now, the head of the Senate's very close. We got 40 members in our caucus. It was, 21-19 or whatever the count was. Who knows for sure, because I didn't count the votes. But it's close, and people know that, okay, because we see the board. So if you want to go in there, you got to go in, say the lieutenant governor says, I'm going to gavel in, and I'm going to turn to the clerk and say, open the roll. So what you first have to do, you have to get the majority. You've got to get a quorum, because the end doesn't justify the means to me. You can't go in there and say, I'm going to take over the Senate, but I'm going to violate the Constitution by not having a quorum. I'm not going to have a quorum in the room. You got to have a quorum or you can't vote. So they gave a clerk call a roll. I'm going to do it. If you're mad about the way things are being done and you want to take over the Senate, that means you didn't have a majority of votes when you started. So now, just say it's 21-19. So you get your 19 people in there. Now you've got a choice. You can't start the meeting. You could go to the Democrats, and that'd be a death sentence. You could go to the Democrats and try to get a quorum and start voting. I mean, how long? That's just not even on the table, in my opinion. So you're standing there, and you can't conduct business like that. And that's what I tell people. And it's a different part of the Constitution.
I hadn't thought about the quorum aspect. It changes it.
Oh, considerably. You got to violate everything, and now you're counting votes with only 15 people in there out of 48. So it's much more complicated. It's easier to write about that and talk about that than it is to functionally do that.
I found that applies just about all the time in politics. It's a hell of a lot easier to talk about it than make it happen.
Yeah. It's just like the property tax deal, okay? I go to a lot of these GOP. If you ask anybody, including me, would I like to do away with property tax? I mean, I would love that. But guess what? What's your plan with those things that it's, and what we need to do, and there's going to be a state question, we're going to start lowering this. We're going to start working this thing back because we need to on property tax. We need to do that. But to throw a bomb and just say, let's just do away with it all, man, I tell you what, I want to see a plan on that.
Do you think it would be practical to raise enough money if they had an exemption after age 65 or 70 or 72 or whatever, that your property tax is seized, or at least there was a provision where they couldn't seize your home if you got behind on your taxes? Do you think that's practical?
That's practical.
That thoughts crossed my mind on the repossession after a certain age.
Now, it seems like that would have a minimal effect.
We're also looking at freezing the value at 65.
Yeah.
Just, your house is worth this from here on out because you're 65. Thank you.
Well, that's my main. I've lived in other states. The property taxes here are small change compared to most places. I've got rental properties, and I'm paying like $1,200 or $1,300 a year total on my home and the rental properties. If I was in New Mexico, for instance, where I live, that'd be probably $6,000 or $7,000 easily. If you're in California, you'd probably.
Well, Texas. I've got four siblings, and they all were out of state except me. I never have lived out of state. But they've all moved back except one, the youngest, and she's in Allen, Texas. And when she retires, she's coming back. They're all back now in Oklahoma. and they all were in Cleveland, Ohio, and they were all over they were in Katy, Texas with Halliburton. They've been all these places, but they're now back in Oklahoma, and the number one reason is they got older is property taxes. So we got to. I'm all about getting rid of it, but we got to have a plan. That's the difference between being in the legislature and writing bills, and it's so technical. It is so technical. Hey, you, sir. It's so technical when you write them. How are you? Come on in. Hey, Mike. Darrell Weaver. Nice to see you.
Darrell, can I add something to this?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've been talking about this a lot. A lot of people are upset about property taxes. But one of the things that we believe is they're also looking at their escrow payment on their mortgage growing and growing. That's insurance. That's property insurance. That one's growing just as fast, if not faster, than taxes.
Don't get me started on insurance,
Okay.
because insurance is a problem in Oklahoma. Would anybody agree with that? I got a bill out there right now. It needs one vote to go to the governor, and it has to do with insurances denying medical benefits when you need something done, and I think it just makes me sick. We know an ophthalmologist that they're forced to give certain shots into the eye that they know they don't work before they go on. I mean, how ridiculous is that? But Bill's right. A lot of that property, you read it, you can not only, it's insurance is going up and things like that, and we own some buildings in our practice, and it just keeps skyrocketing. So hopefully we'll be able to do something about that.
Mention taxes. Everybody raises that they don't have income tax down there. Well, that's the other side of that coin. They've got horrendous property tax. Money has to come from somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we're a balanced budget state, and we need to be, because it'd be dangerous if we weren't. We've got to be, because you get up there during appropriations. The governor's already signed the appropriations bill already, and but at the end of the day, it needs to be balanced. And if you only have, got $100 in your family, your bank account, that's all you can spend, and that's the problem. And everybody comes up there, and we all laugh about it. They come up there and they got a great idea, and it's probably a pretty good idea. It really is. Might help somebody, but it's only $250,000. It's only $500,000. This is a $12 billion budget. Surely y'all can find 250, but guess what? There's about 25 or 30, 50 people want that 250, or more. And that's small. Some of them want, well, it's just 10 million, And if you're not careful, you got to be careful. You got to understand how many zeros are on the end of that. That's what you better watch out for, because it adds up. It adds up. Yes, sir.
What is your position on community benefits to the illegals? Medical insurance, driver's licenses, all of the things that go. What's your position on those?
I think if you're not a U.S. citizen, you shouldn't get it. The driver's license is a big deal. When I was in public safety, I wasn't chair at the time. When that first driver's license bill came through I was the only no vote. And it shocked me when I walked out there that day. I thought, that's going to bite some people in this room. And it did. And what it was kind of sold a bill of goods. And the guy that masterminded that is a lawyer on the Democratic side, and he's extremely smart, and he's extremely, he pitched that thing to where, they're not paying taxes, and he had this long deal, and some people were drawn into that. And but at the end of the day, I thought, when we talk about illegal immigration, there's probably nobody in the state of Oklahoma that's worked against that harder than I have based on the Bureau. I mean, we knew what the problem was. We knew, because they were, so, I'm opposed to it. But there's so much pockets of government. Government's gotten so big, and I always tell people this. As Republicans, we all wanted consolidation of agencies at one time. I wasn't in there. Bill, it's for our time. But you got to be careful of that, because I'm going to tell you, people complain a lot when we're at these forums. They're saying, what? And the non-legislators in this race, my race and other races, they just blame the legislature. They just say, man, they need to figure out why that the mental health and substance abuse last year came up with $38 million they couldn't find. They hit us with that, $38 million. And then we find out from DOC we have to buy a private prison in Lawton, Oklahoma, and it ended up being about $300 million. That's what we got hit with last year, not this year, but last year. And I always tell people, be careful when you want to consolidate agencies, because I'm telling you right now, some of them agencies have gotten so big, they nobody know what's going on in. And I'm not talking about legislators, I'm talking about people that's running the joint. And the executive branch they have to get good people and make sure they have good people running those agencies. And that's a problem right now in Oklahoma. You had a mental health director, we impeached her. Do we call it impeachment? Is that what
we were fired?
Yeah, we removed her. Okay, yeah, we fired her. But she came into a meeting, I wasn't in the meeting, but everybody was consistent. And she basically told them, because she's appointed by the governor now, and basically told that committee who was the appropriations committee over trying to help her find the 38 million, what we were gonna do. And she looked them right in the eyes and said, well, I don't work for y'all. Well, okay, that wasn't a good start, that wasn't a good start. Because when you're asking for $38 million. So that's a sidebar, but I'd be careful. Anytime we want lean government, but be careful what you want, because you can create, well, let's just put this little agency with this agency. Well, for long, you got something nobody knows what the heck's going on in there. And it's complex.
Why can't we, for lack of a better term, just say no? When they go to get a driver's license, there's no arguments. You don't get it. You go into a hospital, you don't get it.
Yeah.
And I lived down in Texas for a while, and in Waco, Texas, this is in 2001, 2002. No, as a matter of fact, it was later than that, 2014.
Okay.
80% of the births in the hospitals in Waco, Texas, were paid for by the state because there were so many illegals or uninsured people, and they paid it. It's like, no, you figure out, get a midwife, you go pay for it. If the kid dies, kid dies. I think it's just BS what we're giving away. And, I don't mean to sound like I'm a total curmudgeon, but, we've got to figure it out rather than just paying for it all. We've got to figure out something.
Well, Congress and the federal government needs to get it together. They just do. And it was horrible the Biden years because, we know what happened at the border. It's a mess right now because of it. So, that's all been stopped now, and we're thankful for that. But they've got to find, this is my opinion, they have to find a way to, because we all have friends, probably everybody in here has friends that came over. We have some East Indian friends that came in 1982 with $25 in their pocket. Now they went through the process, and they love America, and they're wealthy, and they made a lot of money, and they worked hard. It's the American dream. That's why we have that. But I think Congress has to do something. When I don't want to use the word fast track because we want it done right, but we want a pathway for people to get, if you've got a family here for 25 years and they've been working, what's the answer? Because you got to know who's in your house legally. And that's what I used to say at the Bureau. That's a problem with immigration. We want people in our house, but we want to know who they are. And that's the problem. So I agree with you. I agree with what we're paying. Thank you for your service. Yes, sir.
Where are you on the Indian issues like tags and privileges that they get?
I think the McGirt ruling, and when I ran the Bureau, we did the first cross-deputization with the Chickasaws. We did it at the Capitol. This was back about 2007 or 8. So the criminal jurisdiction issues, I kind of giggle under my breath. We were that was always been an issue. If you're a non-Indian law enforcement agency and you try to arrest somebody on Indian land, you had to have somebody with you. Or we would lure them in the drug business. We lured them off Indian land. We knew where the Indian land was. And we did that before. And some of them knew that they were safe on the Indian land. I remember one guy down in Lawton, he knew that he would never sell off of Indian land, but he made a mistake one day and we arrested him. And But my deal is the McGirt ruling was very specifically criminal, okay? So number one, I think that the thought of it outgoing and, get taxation, I think there's been a ruling or that the Supreme Court decided they weren't going to rule on the tax, which was a defeat for that. But at the end of the day, the high court of the land ruled on the McGirt, so we've just had to work around it. I think it's very complex, and I agree with the governor. It's complex when you have two sovereign nations, and what you can't treat your citizens differently. So I agree with some of that, but I also believe that as long as there's a Supreme Court ruling that says that they're a sovereign nation, then I think we have to respect the law of the land. As much as we don't like it, if you don't like it. But I do think that if you're dealt that hand, you've got to play, and I made some comments before you come in about working with the tribes, but I think you work together. The big five tribes are all Fortune 500 companies right now. They're doing a lot for healthcare. They're doing a lot for business. So I'm of the opinion, as a lieutenant governor, I'm going to work with these. And I met with many, not all of them. I think we have 42 tribes. I hadn't met with all of them, but I met with a bunch of them, some the big boys in particular. And I think you work with them, and I think they have a lot to offer Oklahoma. And like I said a while ago, the world is fascinated by the tribes, where we're all part of the tribe, and we all just kind of take it for granted, right? But I think Oklahoma has a gem there, if you would, to be able to work with them. But I would work with the tribes. I always do. I don't look at it like I carried the Indigenous Missing Peoples bill for them last year. I carried a DUI bill that the tribes wanted. I had to override the governor but it was the right bill to do. So I just think you just work with people and treat them fairly.
What are the most contentious issues, as you say, between the state and the tribes? And it may be different for each tribe, but what's an overall feeling of the government versus the nations?
Right now, I think the overall feeling is a lot of anxiety toward Oklahoma government, and I think, I think that the governor and the tribes have they started out. I've just kind of used my terminology on a bad foot. They started negotiating a pact, and some of that all started with that negotiation. It went south. And it just seemed like they'd never been, took punches on each other, and they haven't been able to recover in 8 years. And I think that I'm not going to lay blame on anybody here, but it just went downhill, and it never has recovered. So I think that that's the biggest thing you kind of sense out there talking to the tribes. They're just I think they're sitting back in the shadows waiting for new leadership and to see who's going to try to work with them next time. That's what I think. So it's really just this long 8 years of battling with each other. And I think both sides. I even think the governor's weary of it. He didn't tell me that, but I think he is. But you got to get along with people. There's nothing wrong. You can hold your own against people. You can vote against people in the Senate. But that doesn't mean you can't get along with people or hear people out. And I think that I don't know anything about their meetings. I've never been in one meeting with the governor and the tribes, but I would suspect it doesn't seem they go very well. I'll just be nice. Yeah. We'll just put it that way. I don't sense that. So. Any more? Well, it's after one. Yes, ma'am.
You haven't talked at all about education, and Oklahoma is way down, and Ponca City's even down.
Yes. Well, there's one thing about it. In my 8 years in the legislature, there's not been a time. At times you get hot topics that come across, and I know when McGirt first came out, that was a big deal. What are we going to do? Because that created a workflow issue for prosecutors, because all the tribes were getting the prosecutors. So there's a lot of issues. So you always have these issues. I can honestly say before you, I don't know that there's anything more hot and heavy right now among the House, the Senate, the governor's office, some powerful people that have influence. They want something done with education. And this year, I know we've passed measures with the Reading Act And there's so many things happening out there. I'm not in education, but we want to change in Oklahoma. We hear about the Mississippi Miracle. But what people have to understand about that Oklahoma passed the Mississippi Miracle at the same time, or even before. Somebody said before they did. And what happened? Where did it go south? Well, it went south because people started gnawing away and changing what was put in place originally. And I had somebody, it was actually Julie Daniels, which is our floor leader. She said something in a meeting I was in one day. It had nothing, we was away from the Capitol, and she said a few words, and education came up. And she said these words, and it's very interesting. And I hadn't even told Julie I'm repeating this, but I will. She said, and I agree with this, she said, I'm for term limits, she said. I'm for term limits, 12 years. But the problem with term limits is after that law was passed, people started terming out and getting out of the legislature. New legislators come in, they would bring it from their district or whatever, saying, hey, we can't hold these kids back. We can't. In other words, it gnawed away at the bill. It gnawed away because you didn't have that institutional knowledge. You said, wait a second, we do it. So right now, there's a lot going on in education. We're giving the teachers a pay raise. I think that there was a rocky time at the State Department of Education for a time there, so I think that Oklahoma wants something done. We're 47th or something right now, and I heard somebody talk about that stat the other day that was kind of interesting. It said that the way they do that is that we take a real hard hit in Oklahoma when it comes to kids. You can't, the way that measurement was, one of the criteria was how long you're out of class. And even if you're out of class for recognized absence. In other words, Oklahoma, in rural Oklahoma, we want kids in band. We want kids playing football. We want kids playing we want kids in something, right? And it necessarily don't have to be a sport. But supposedly, and I don't know this for a fact, but I've heard this a couple of different times, that because of the way that some of that criteria is, we are punished in our rankings because of that, because we allow those kids to go to that. So I don't know, but that makes sense a little bit. So you don't know, and I'm sure it may be a couple of spots. I'm not defending our ranking by any measure, but it's hot and heavy right now on the
What do you think about the State Department of Education?
I think that it got off on a rocky start, and I think sometimes you can have the right message and want to do things, but you can have some of the right motives but the wrong message. And I think when the superintendent was in there, the last superintendent, I think that when he came in and he took down the Hall of Fame of the teachers, I think that was a bad gesture. Whether you agree with what public education is doing or not, I thought that was a bad start. And I think that I got a lot of friends that are teachers. I was a public ed guy. My wife was. Our kids were. So I think you just have to. I think teachers have a big influence, and I think we have to respect them. And I think we have to. And I think that there's a morale issue among teachers right now. I think discipline in the classroom is a big deal. I know it is down around the metro area. That's probably one of the number one things I hear is that there's no discipline in the classroom. So that's tough to do. Back whenever I was in school, you behaved. If you got swats at school, you got one at home. And I'm not saying you may be for or against the swatting of a child, but I know it sure got my attention. And so there's a lot of work to do there, but it'd be like me going to run the narcotics bureau and not like drug agents. I mean, we just got to love our teachers and try to get them there. We need to get rid of the bad ones, and it's just like bad cops. I have no place for bad cops. Yeah, I think one thing about it as a senator, I haven't heard much right now. What's going on over there? There's no rumbling. There's not a lot saying. I think that people are really trying to say we're going to get this thing together and move it forward. So there's not, well, there for a while, every day it was, when are you going to impeach Ryan Walters, every day. And at the end of the day, we don't impeach. We were the jury on impeachment. So I wouldn't even make a comment about it because I probably have more jury experience and a courtroom experience than anybody in that Senate. I'm not a lawyer. but I've been in a lot of courtrooms in my career, and I did not want to eliminate myself as a juror if in fact he did get impeached, and so.
I'm just wondering, maybe the problem with education is we're not paying the superintendents enough money. LOL.
Yeah, that's, you know, I'm not gonna say another thing, I'll piss somebody off.
You're good at that.
I know.
Well, we got too many school districts. We pay too much money. But the problem is that everybody wants local control in their community. It's almost like congressmen. Everybody hates Congress, but we keep sending our congressmen back. And it's some of that with the school districts. We can't stand what's happening in school districts, but we don't come down here, state of Oklahoma, and tell us what to do with our school district. And you get a little of that. You get into this, we jokingly say at the Capitol, we always use local control when we want to use local control, right? But when it works against us, we don't want to use it. This ain't local control, this deal, So, but yeah, they make a lot of money, and I see that, but do you strip your school boards away from the ability to do that? And then that's complex. And the school districts, I'm just going to say one more thing about that. When we were set up as a populous state in 1907, they wanted, that's how we have so many county seats. I mean, if you've been in a Panhandle, there's not a lot of people out there, and there's 3 county commissioners for 3 counties out there. But it was set up that way because Oklahoma is a populous state. They wanted one horseback ride to the county seat, and they want their school district. And honestly, when you get into consolidating schools, it gets tricky in rural Oklahoma because how long do you want a kid on a school bus? What are you going to do? So it gets complex. I think somebody said this week to me, they said, actually yesterday, they said that if you take the 2 largest school districts out of the equation, Oklahoma would be much higher than the 47. Yeah, it is. But there's things going on there at a national level, and I haven't kept up with that at a national level in a long time. But I know there's some shaking and moving in that, and there's a lot of fingers to that, We've got a very active conservative teachers group now that's people can join that they've been in works a long time. That's got some legs now. I think that's a big deal because some of the more liberal school organizations kind of drifted a certain way. So I think that overall, I think we're on the right track. But there's an election coming up in the state school superintendent, and that's going to be an important election for. I know you're very much into education. That's going to be important to get that right person, whoever it is. Huh?
I work with
Yeah, I know you. Yeah, but so that election is going to be extremely important to you. What do we do? What do you do for your education? I drill down and vet people hard. And I'm going to say one more thing, and we're probably going to conclude with this. And I tell people, and this dawned on me a few months ago, and I tell people in a crowd. As someone that's knocked on doors and someone that's been in public service now, elected public official since 2018, I always tell people, be careful. Always ask the second or third question to someone. Because the first question is always easy for the person. They always, do you support Second Amendment? Yeah, I support it. Okay, thank you. No. Ask the second or third question. Now, how do you support the Second Amendment? Well, I support it because I carried the Personal Property Protection Act. I carried it. Well, what else? Well, I let 16 bills come out of the Senate because I'm that big of a supporter, the most in the state history. And by that time, you should move on to another question. But don't just ask one question. That's our mistake in asking people. It's great advice. And it dawned on me because that's where you start stumbling at if you really don't know what you're talking about. And we all get the canned answers sometimes to things, and I'm just telling you, ask at second. And I've been telling people that groups, to women's groups and stuff, and I mean to tell you, they're like, oh my gosh, but I'm going to start doing that. So that's just something. Terry, I appreciate you having me here. I really do. It's been an honor to be here, my wife and I. So thank you all. Thank you all for the wonderful questions. Thank you.
And I want everybody to know I offered Bill Coleman the microphone for a few minutes, and he's gonna take a rain check on it.
And I'll be back in May
Okay.
with a clearer brain, I hope.
Well, I just want everybody to know, when I have especially, and any candidate, but especially an incumbent, they've always got an offer to get at least a couple of minutes on the microphone, so I just want everybody to know.
You did.
Now, any other questions or comments from anybody before we ring it out for today?
Watch the sky today and tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The sky?
Be weather aware.
Oh, there's weather coming again?
Tonight especially.
Tonight and tomorrow.
Yeah, we've already had 3 tornadoes in 6 days.
Yeah. I canceled my last Tuesday meeting because of the forecast, tennis ball size hail and tornadoes. Tonkawa, these fronts go around Tonkawa more often than not. It's really amazing. But it's the last time I've canceled, and it was the second time in a week I've changed major plans because of the weather forecast. Welcome to Oklahoma, right?
Wait till the next time and you don't change it.
I got spoiled. I lived in Arizona and New Mexico more than half of my years, and the weather there is boring. Sunny and low humidity every day. Well, not so bad in Albuquerque. I lived at a mile elevations. It was kind of moderated, but anyway, I want to thank the ones who showed up today. Thank you so much. And I was hoping we'd fill the room for you, Darrell, but it's the way it is. Okay, folks, and I got to get to Wichita, so let's all go out and talk in the parking lot, and that way Stephen can get out of here and get on his motorcycle today.
Where you going to Wichita?
Oh,